Hey, what's going on guys? My name is Logan with West Desert Shooter. In this video, I'm going to show you guys just how easy it is for you to install a new trigger in your Uintah Precision rifles. Now this will work for the 15s or the 10s. In my case, this is a UPR 10 sitting behind me. Now the great thing about Uintah Precision rifles is that they are based on an AR-15 or AR-10 lower. So if you know and understand how to install a trigger on an AR-15, which is basically the same as an AR-10, as far as trigger install goes, you already know how to do this. If you don't, let's get to it. Right guys, so here is our lower basically disassembled to the point where we're ready to install our trigger. Obviously we have our grip. This is the hardware that holds the grip in. This is the rear takedown pin. And then we also have the little spring and detent for that rear takedown. And then we're also going to have a detent for the safety selector that is going to ride on top of our trigger. So first thing we need to do is grab our trigger and get it slid into the lower here. As you can see, I do have the stock installed on the rear of this lower. However, if yours is not installed yet because you're building your rifle, you don't got to worry about that step just yet. Now, let's grab the trigger. This one is branded UP because this is their own trigger. This is actually their new UPR trigger designed specifically to work flawlessly with their bolts. Uintah Precision does have a compatibility chart when it comes to triggers, so be sure to check that compatibility chart for your rifle build. Let's drop this guy in here. It's going to be super simple. We're just going to make sure that it is lined up with our trigger pin holes before placing our trigger pins down into the lower. Now, I prefer to lay mine on its side so that once I make my adjustment to the trigger itself, it stays in place. These trigger pins should freely slide down into the lower. And because I do have this magazine release extension, I'm going to put this pin in from the other side. We need to move the trigger just a little bit. There we go. Okay, now we are not done with the trigger install just yet. There are two small set screws that are going to push down against the bottom of the lower, and we need to adjust those to where they put tension on our pins so our pins don't come out at a later point. UP does include a set of install instructions, and they do note that it is a 5/64 hex driver to install and tighten up those set screws. Feels like they do have some Loctite on them, so which is good. It shouldn't walk out of the trigger. And then there's one on both sides of the trigger, so just nice and easy. Now this is a very small Allen key, so do not strip it. You just want to put some tension on the side of it. That Loctite will hold it in place. There we go. Okay, now we want to make sure that our trigger pins are completely centered, and then that is where we want them. So as you can see down on each side of the hammer spring there are those two black circles. Those are the set screws that you're looking to tighten up. Okay guys, now this is where an AR-10 will likely differ from the AR-15, I believe. AR-15 on the rear takedown pin, there is usually a detent that comes in from the backside from the stock. So on an AR-15, you would need to have your stock removed. On an AR-10, the detent actually goes further forward, so it sits under your grip just like your safety pin does. All right, now that I've finagled my safety selector into here, if you guys are having issues with this where it doesn't want to pass through, it is possible you need to punch out this pin, pull out your set screws so the trigger can actually drop just a little bit further down in there. Go ahead and install it, and then put your pin back in and put your set screws into the lower. Now, one thing on that, if you are using a polymer lower, Uintah Precision mentioned that some people have had issues where those set screws will go into the plastic because metal is stronger than plastic. So if you're using a polymer lower, be aware of that those set screws may end up pushing down into your lower. And also, if you're going to be running back and forth between semi-auto and the bolt guns, be sure to use those set screws and get those pushed and tensioned against the bottom of your lower. They are very important so that it does not go above and beyond semi-automatic, we'll say. Got our safety selector in here. Now it is time to install our detents. So you can see our two detents. You got the forward and the rear. This is for your takedown, and this is for the safety selector. They are different sizes, so when you're looking at your little springs and detents, it's fairly obvious which one's which. These two are larger, these two are smaller. We can see the bottom side of this takedown pin has a groove for that to lock into, and you can no longer rotate this easily. So now let's tip things sideways. Let's drop the forward detent down in there. Now there's not much room for the spring to sit, That is because on AR-15 grips, they should have a hole drilled out for that spring to drop down into. Now on an AR-10, this one does not have a secondary hole, so you will need to be aware that you're going to be putting spring pressure into the top side of the grip. Don't let that spring fold sideways and go shooting off across your room. Hold this on 90 degrees, slide the two together. Putting forward pressure on the grip before it slides up will help that spring conform and go where you want it to. And then for a piece of hardware that can actually reach up the bottom side of the grip, I like these little screwdrivers and with the replaceable tips. And then I just put a little Allen bit on there. And there we go. Let's get this good and snug. Okay, now let's function check it. Cock it back. Go ahead and make sure it works. Detent, reset, drop. Cock it, safe, not going anywhere, fire. All right, this passed the safety check. We can also check our takedown pins. Has a nice little detent at each stop to hold it in place. Everything is looking good there. Let's open up the front and then let's go ahead and install our upper back on. Let's go ahead and get the upper drop down onto that lower. Got the front pin in, rear pin always follows suit. There's no magazine in the gun, and I just cleared it. Running finger in there, nothing in there. Let's track the trigger. Okay. Let's select safe. Not going anywhere. Still run your bolt on safe. Select fire. Well, as I mentioned, guys, this is a very straightforward install if you already know how to install a trigger onto an AR-15 or in this case an AR-10. These Uintah Precision rifles are awesome because they are AR rifles. Now they are not semi-auto thanks to the upper, but the lower is 100% an AR, which is why their uppers are compatible with standard AR-15 lowers. So you can convert them back and forth. A lot of people ask why I like the Uintah Precisions. Well, how many bolt guns do you know of that you can convert to semi-auto and then right back? So that's what's really awesome about these platforms. I hope you guys enjoyed this little tutorial. I hope you learned a few tips and tricks. Maybe you didn't, maybe you already knew how to do it, but that's just fine. It gives you a little refresher as to what's going on inside of your AR rifle. Appreciate you guys watching. If you have any questions, drop a comment below and we'll see you guys in the next one.